Welcome to the Athletic FC podcast with me, Akinwolere. 2026 hasn't started well for Crystal Palace. Captain sold, 12 games without a win and sliding down the table. So how much danger are Palace actually in? All right, in with us today, we've got our Crystal Palace correspondent, Matt Woosnam. We've also got Dom Fifield as well. All right, let's get into this. On Monday, the transfer window closed. In the window, Palace twice broke their transfer record by bringing in Brennan Johnson and Jurgen Strand-Larsen. Matt, your latest article, though, on The Athletic refers to Palace's chaotic window in many respects. How much madness was there going on behind the scenes?
Yeah, it was a pretty crazy window for Palace. Quite unusual, really, for such a hive of activity, but perhaps not so unusual for it to be so late. Club record, as you say, broke the club record twice, spending a huge amount of money, which again is quite unlike Palace. And it could have been a lot more as well. They had quite a few options that they were exploring to bring in. But yeah, it was a bit mad, really, for Palace.
Yeah, and Dom, you've raised concerns on a podcast I think we did after the FA Cup defeat to Macclesfield, and you've raised concerns about, the money spent over the summer. But I mean, look, they've broken their transfer record twice. I mean, why is it so doom and gloom at this moment in time?
Yeah, they can't win, can they? People have a go at them when they don't spend money, and then people have a go at them when they do spend money. Obviously, it's the people they've brought in, because these are guys that are very different from the profile that Crystal Palace would normally recruit at this time in the window. Now, I mean, I have a bit of sympathy for Palace on this front, because I think they went into this January window trying to solve problems. If you look at the two players that ended up leaving, and then Mateta, who's still there. Eza left right at the end of the summer window, 300 first team appearances under his belt for various clubs. Mark Guehi was always a possibility that he might leave in this window. He did, 250 first team appearances for the club, or for Swansea and Palace. And then Jean-Philippe Mateta, who you can't see playing for Palace again, certainly no time soon. 340 odd appearances for Palace. That's 900 first team appearances between those three. Are you taking them out? You're not taking them out of the squad. You're taking them out of the first team. So Palace are actually in a rather strange situation. It's one that they'd always dreaded, really, where two or three of their stars would leave in very quick time. They usually sold one at most in a window. And they needed to replace them, and they needed to replace them with players who are Premier League ready, who could come in and be secured mid-season. Not easy. And really, on paper, that's what they've done. Strand-Larsen, 250 appearances. Evan Gassar, 192. Brennan Johnson, 260. That's 700 appearances, and all for players that their average age is a lot lower than the three that departed. So, you can't judge a transfer window, as much as we like to. You can't judge a transfer window as soon as the deadline passes. You judge a transfer window in 3 months' time, 6 months' time, 9 months' time, even. So let's have a look and see how well these three guys settle in at the club, and whether they have an impact, whether they take Palace to the Conference League title and Europa League football, whether they keep them in the division, and then judge whether this was a good window or not. And that's the only time you can do it. It's very, very difficult to judge, to make a snap judgment on a transfer window purely by the money that's been spent.
Yeah, on that, Dom, the way you're looking at this squad right now, obviously we'll talk about the Premier League a little later. Does this look like a squad that can compete all the way through to the Europa Conference League final?
Well, I mean, it really should, shouldn't it? Let's be honest. It's the least onerous of the European competitions. I think Palace have got the biggest budget in the competition. They're probably established as favourites, despite their rather sloppy performance in the group stage. All three of those players go into the squad. All three of them add something different. The fact that Crystal Palace aren't in the FA Cup and aren't in the League Cup, and I think their Premier League ambitions have been tempered slightly, probably means that they can concentrate a bit more on the Conference League. And I'd expect them to go very, very deep in that competition, if not win it. I mean, I think a lot of people at the start of the season probably thought they should win it anyway, but they've now got a squad that's probably slightly better attuned to going deep into that competition.
Okay, I'm hoping that's one of the many positives we'll try and touch on in this podcast, gents. Matt, let's talk about the recruitment. How different has that department been since Dougie Freedman left?
Yeah, so obviously Freedman left, I think it was March time, so it's almost a year since Dougie Freedman left Palace. Matt Hobbs came in, the former Wolves sporting director. That's really the main change is that. I think Steve Parish, the chairman, had worked with Dougie Freedman for such a long time. They knew each other really well. They trusted each other. So for someone new to come in and have to sort of change things around and see what was going on and get settle in, a bit like the players really, get these new guys settle in, I'm sure it's quite challenging. I think that he's come in and he's on a short-term contract, so we'll see what happens with his future. In my interview with Steve Parish back in December, that he sort of spoke about potentially changing the structure of the recruitment and making it a bit bigger and a bit broader and more of a department rather than kind of relying on one person. And I think that's a sensible thing for a club like Palace to do. So it is different, and I think it'll look different still. And I think they're still working out exactly what life after Dougie Freedman looks like.
Yeah. Can we talk about Mark Guehi? Because I don't think it was a surprise that he left in January, considering all the speculation over the summer in general. How much of a bigger hole does that leave, Matt, for Palace? We've talked about recruitment elsewhere, but I mean, that's the club captain mid-season gone.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's impossible to replace him. Like, he's such an incredibly talented player, but also, in the squad, a big part of the squad as well, as in off the pitch, a big part of the dressing room. And he's someone who leads by example. And I think Palace will miss that. But actually, Palace's problems are at the other end of the pitch. They're not really at the back. They're more up the other end of the pitch, not scoring goals, which is why they focused on trying to get goal scorers and did indeed, do that in the summer, in the winter window. But yeah, clearly they're going to massively miss Guehi, and the fact they didn't get anyone in despite their best efforts to replace him is going to be somewhat of a problem. You have got Shadi Riyad coming back from injury after a very long time out, but again, he's inexperienced as well. It's not like he's sort of played a lot of games and got injured and then come back. But he's someone that they'll certainly look at to fill that gap. You might think that Oliver Glasner might change the system, but he said that he won't do that. He kind of implied he might and then change his mind. So yeah, look, it's impossible to replace him. He's such an incredibly talented player, and if Palace were to replace him, how do you replace someone who, in other circumstances, would have gone for 60 million or so? Palace just can't do that at this moment in time.
Yeah, I'm the name JD Camvo is one that comes into mind, the lad from Toulouse that they brought in, dumb in many respects. I don't know if that's a direct replacement or not, but not necessarily the defensive qualities of players, but I guess it's also the leadership you're losing from Mark Guehi, a point in which you're looking for a team to find that fight, to try and see out the season in many respects.
Yeah, look, that's not ideal at all. You say that there was a good chance he was going to leave in January. There wasn't really, because if Manchester City centre halves hadn't dropped like flies, they wouldn't have moved for him in January either. So he would have been at Palace until the end of the season and then moved on a free transfer. So Matt's right. You can't replace a player of that calibre in January. You can try. I mean, they put bids in for Araujo at Benfica and Ordonez at Bruges, and they didn't come off, largely because clubs don't want to lose key players mid-season. I mean, Benfica have got a Champions League tie against Real Madrid coming up. They don't want to lose one of their best centre-halves ahead of that. So I mean, that's hence the sort of looking at Ethan Pinnock as a sort of stopgap until the end of the season. There was a logic to doing it that way, because the model, as has been explained previously, the idea is that you have replacements coming in lined up when a big player leaves. I don't think Palace have ever really got that exactly right. They're certainly not as slick as the Brighton and Hove Albion recruitment department when it comes to that. But that said, I think you're more likely to get a ready-made replacement for Mark Guehi in the summer than you are in January, just because of the calibre of player that you've got to bring in to fill in that hole, that void that's been left behind. So it'd be a massive miss. And he'll do brilliantly well at Manchester City over time once he's settled in there. And Palace have to get by. I do wonder now that Palace might have gone the other way, and Matt says that their priorities was very much at the front line, but it feels an awfully long time since Palace looked defensively stable as well. So it's going to those forwards better start scoring.
On that point though, Dom, I would just say that a big part of that, I think, is because of the pressure that's gone on the defence as a result of, I would say in large, Jean-Philippe Mateta missing really good chances. I think that just puts a lot of pressure on the defence, especially the way that Palace play in transition. I think a large part of the defensive vulnerability, and also Mark Guehi was part of that team that was, I think, was it 9 games? I think he played in that winless run. So obviously, there's part of that there, but I do think some of it at least has to go down to the poor finishing from the whole team.
You've kind of led me to my next question, Matt. Jean-Philippe Mateta, where do we even start with this one, gents? Look, I've really loved watching him as a football fan. I went to watch him in Marseille when he played for France in the Olympics under Thierry Henry. Brilliant player. I'd say the last 2 seasons for him have been really magnificent. Maybe not this season so far, but where do we start with this one? Can he spare his blushes and come back into this squad, Matt? How do we deal with this?
Yeah, it's going to be difficult if he. The first thing is what happens with his injury. He's got a knee problem, and that was part of the problem with the move to AC Milan that was proposed, and could have happened, and also elsewhere. He could have gone elsewhere, but the knee was part of the problem with that. There were other issues around that deal, but that was certainly part of it. So what happens with his knee, whether or not he needs an operation, whether he goes for an operation. Also Palace obviously have just absolutely obliterated, not just broken, but obliterated their transfer record to sign Jurgen Strand-Larsen. So they're not going to put him on the bench, and Glasner's only going to play with one up front. So, and Mateta's out of form. He is Palace's top scorer, but he is out of form as well. I think we have to accept that. Maybe that's partly because of the knee injury. So the chances, as I think Dom said this earlier, the chances of him playing for Palace anytime soon are pretty limited. But I think Palace are probably expecting to sell him in the summer. He is in the last. By then he'll have 12 months left on his contract. That contract's been, there's been negotiations around that contract since 2020, summer 2024. So, sort of 18 months they've been. Well, before that they've been talking about, getting a new contract, and he hasn't. He hasn't wanted that. He wanted to go and play in the Champions League, and I think. We saw some comments from Dean Henderson after the Nottingham Forest game, which were kind of quite loaded. It felt he talked about players. Kind of the implication was talking about players who wanted to be there. There was no mention of Mateta, of course, but it kind of felt like it was aimed at Mateta. And the fans were singing critical songs of him. They were singing the Wilfried Zaha song at Forest after that spat between Mateta and Zaha on social media. They sang other songs that were critical of Mateta. So it's going to be hard for him to win them back as well. So it's not looking great for him at Palace in his future.
Yeah, it's a weird time to be saying you want to go and then actually the deal doesn't play off, does it, Dom? Do you know what I mean?
Can I just say, I actually feel a bit sorry for Jean-Philippe Mateta because I think he's been unbelievably poorly advised. Really, really poorly advised. There's been a contract, as Matt says, on the table for him at Palace since the summer of 2024 on improved terms that would have put him right up there with the club's biggest earners. And he never signed it. He was told not to sign it because I don't know what the logic was that for. Why would you do that? Why would you not at least earn really, really well until that move comes? He's seen other players at the club sign terms and be sold. Michael Iliffe being the principal example of that, but also Eberechi has he got his move after signing improved terms. And he hasn't signed it. And then they forced a move. They tried to force a move at the worst possible time. The worst possible time. The player is enduring his worst spell of form since pre-Glasner. he's got a knee problem that is clearly hampering him and probably really affecting that form and the way he's playing games. I mean, there's a sympathy there, but why would you then try and force a move mid-season? So now he's in a complete state of limbo. If he's done it to try and get his World Cup ambitions realised.
That was my thought. Is that why?
Yeah,
I mean, or to stay
then,
where you are and bang in the goals if you can.
Exactly. I mean, is he going to get more games at Crystal Palace, or is he going to get more games in the Premier League, or more games at Milan in Italy? I just don't see it. And look, let's be honest. Any club that spends a lot of money on him mid-season is going to want him to hit the ground running. And if he's carrying a knee problem, which is going to require surgery potentially, and it's going to keep him out for a while, then why would they spend the money now? Honestly, it's completely misguided. His last opportunity to show Didier Deschamps what he can do ahead of the World Cup squad effectively is in the March internationals. And now he's probably not going to even be fit enough to play in those March internationals. So I do wonder now whether he'll end up leaving Crystal Palace in the summer, but he may well end up out of France's squad as well. And I don't want to blame him, but he's been poorly advised.
Well, I don't want to weigh in on the negativity, but Nick Miller wrote on The Athletic recently about the moral demise of Crystal Palace. Why smaller clubs can't have nice things. Dom, 2025 saw Palace play at Wembley 3 times, FA Cup semi-final, final, and then obviously the Community Shield. They won a trophy for the first time. They qualified for Europe as a result. I guess 2026 would have been hard to live up to in that respect. But I mean, it's been quite a start to 2026 for Palace in the fact that players are going. And obviously we are seeing a squad that potentially are kind of working their way down the table.
Yeah, I mean, that's what happens. I would say that's what happens at quite a lot of middle class Premier League teams that hit their ceiling and they just get their best talents get cherry-picked by the elite. That's what happens. That's almost inevitable. It's just the food chain in English football. But in Palace's case, I've seen this. I'm old enough to have seen this twice before. I mean, I'm actually got behind me here. There's a picture of Malcolm Allison on the screen there. Now, that isn't from the team of the 80s, but I think that's when he returned to the club when the team of the 80s was unravelling. But Palace had one of the most exciting football teams emerging from the 1970s, going into the 80s in the top division. We're top of the league briefly at the end of 1979. And that team, actually sparked by the sale of a player to Arsenal, come to think of it, disintegrated. And, they spent the 80s in the second division and with crowds a fraction of what they used to be. You fast forward to the 90s, and Crystal Palace finished third in the top division, denied a place in Europe by a late reprieve for Liverpool by UEFA. There's a player sold to Arsenal, and suddenly it all unravels. And now here we are.
I see where you're going with this.
Yeah, and farewell, Ebbs, and thanks very much.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry the big money of Arsenal have come in again to pick one of Palace's best prospects. But I mean, look, is that just something you accept as a fan of a club in Palace's position, that it will never be as good for a long period of time? I mean, last season was phenomenal. I mean, I think across the football world, everyone was quite happy to see Palace do really well. But I don't know what it's like to sit in that position where you're thinking, I don't know how long this will actually last on.
I think the realistic Crystal Palace fans out there, myself included, made sure we really, really enjoyed the summer of 2025, the day in May, and then the Community Shield at the start of the season, because we suspected it might go this way. I mean, that is what Palace have been telling their players when they've been buying these young talents who they've then developed. We are a stepping stone for you in your careers. So there's an inevitability at some point they all leave. As I said before, you don't want them all leaving at once, and I think that's really the problem here, the issue here, coupled with the managerial situation and a manager who maybe didn't quite grasp it in the same way, maybe wants to break that cycle, but I'm not sure that cycle can be broken, really. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is. We nothing can ever take well, Palace fans will always have the summer of 2025. They will always have that. They're also, we shouldn't, let's not exaggerate. There's still a chance that Crystal Palace go on and win a European trophy this season. I mean, it's not all doom and gloom. I mean, they need to start winning games again to raise the mood and to banish that spectre of Premier League relegation, because they are, it was only in December the 7th, I think, that Palace were 4th in the division. So I mean, it's been a slide, but so maybe a few wins just restores a bit of order and respect to the campaign, and then let's see how far they go in Europe, because if they lift that trophy in Leipzig, for all that's happened, in the context of Crystal Palace history, it would still be a really, really significant season and one of huge progress, bizarrely, although it doesn't feel like it at the moment.
Matt, do you think Palace will ever be or have the opportunity to be a team like Aston Villa, for instance, who are trying to break into some sort of top echelon of football?
I think they have to believe that they can. I think what's the point of not aspiring to be like that and not dreaming? I know there's an element.
Is that delusion or is that reality? I mean, I'm being serious. I'm not a Palace fan, but I can imagine there is a dream, but there's also a reality when, yes, you bring another kid in, Pino. If Pino has another great season at Palace, you can see him not being there next season.
They need to improve their infrastructure and get more money from elsewhere. That's the main thing, especially with, I think the problem for Palace as well is the new financial rules as well. That's another thing I think that drove some of their business this window, as well as an eye on what they might lose in the summer and replacements. But yeah, I think it's very hard to get anywhere in the Premier League now. I'm sure Matt Slater will tell you all about the finances, and Chris Weatherspoon will as well. But I think it's extremely difficult for Palace to reach a level of Aston Villa. But I don't think it's completely impossible. I think with the right signings, with the right decisions, with luck, I don't think it's impossible to get there, stay there. Maybe that's another matter. But Palace have been in the Premier League for a long time now. I think their idea is to continue their steady progress and their gradual progress. And sometimes that's not enough for people, and I can understand that. We always want more. It's not enough for Oliver Glasner, that's for sure. But yeah, I think it's challenging, but not impossible.
Well, I mean, let's talk about Glasner, as you've mentioned it, Matt. He's mentioned he's leaving at the end of the season. What's going on here?
Yeah, I think that Palace will be in touch with managers already. It's one of the reasons Glasner said that he told them when he did was he told Steve Parish over dinner during the October international break that he wasn't going to sign a new contract with the club, and they sort of agreed to keep that between themselves. And then obviously he then came out with that in an outburst, an astonishing press conference. It was absolutely crazy. Just before the Palace played Sunderland a couple of weeks ago, or a few weeks ago now. But I think Palace will be looking at new managers. I think, to be honest, Palace may sort of revert a little bit to someone that they sort of have more familiarity with, a style of play that they have more familiarity with, a manager that they maybe know a bit more about, someone like that, someone who's perhaps less emotional and a bit more grounded, and probably less ambitious. But I think it's hard to be more ambitious than Glasner, to be honest. From day one, it's been clear how much and I think again, as Steve Parish told me, you do have to have someone in the club who wants to push you forward and who does have that ambition. So I think they will look at various different types of managers, and it won't necessarily be a domestic manager again, but I wouldn't rule that out either. But I think it will be at the end of the season that Palace replace their manager, not before.
Do you reckon it can really damage a manager's potential new employer when they see people like Glasner, Amorim, Maresca in these press conferences to the press, just going ham on the leadership and the clubs that they're at? Because I'm thinking, if I'm going to spend a lot of money on buying into someone's philosophy as someone who runs a club, I kind of want them to play the game a little bit, Dom.
Well, it must do, mustn't it? I mean, It's not a good look. The optics are terrible. I would say that every big Premier League club out there, let's say Premier League for now, but probably every big club on the planet thinks that they can change people. They won't happen. That won't happen with us. He won't do that with us. We're different to Crystal Palace, Eintracht Frankfurt, Wolfsburg. Oh, wait a minute, there's a bit of a recurring theme here. So there will be faith that they can be different, that they can change him, they can make him more malleable, and he will accept what how they run the club. But on one level, the alarm bells will have been ringing, definitely, because you can't have an employee of the club just come out and say the things that he did, even if he was justified in a lot of the things he said, and even if it's completely understandable the level of frustration that he was voicing, you just don't do that in public, unfortunately.
Okay, Matt, I want to sort of harbour in on where Palace are at right now, 12 games without a win in all competitions. Dom has mentioned, that after their last Premier League win over Fulham on the 7th of December, Palace were actually 4th. They're now 15th. Let's talk about relegation. How likely is it that they get dragged into this relegation situation? Because for all the glory of last season and how it all ended, perhaps they might still do well in Europe, but there is still the Premier League to think about.
Palace are not going to get relegated.
Okay.
Straight up.
Okay.
They're not going to relegate.
Down. Okay.
If Palace get relegated, you can clip this up, put it on social media, tag me, and put me in the stocks publicly. 2 years ago, Palace were in a pretty bad situation, and Oliver Glasner took over and pushed them forward. I think the reason I'm being a bit silly, but I don't think Palace are going to get relegated. Opta had it down before the Forest game. I haven't looked after, but before the Forest game, it was a 2% chance of relegation. They got a point out of that Forest game. I think they're a point further away from West Ham, who are now, I think, 9 points behind Palace. For West Ham to bridge that gap, and also Leeds are there as well. Leeds are down there as well. So for that gap to be bridged it would take something extraordinary, I think, which isn't impossible, but very, very unlikely. Palace have got key players coming back. Ismail Assar, Daniel Munoz are back. Daichi Kamada in the midfield should be back for the Brighton game. And the chances of Palace not winning games again is just so low. I think, as Glasner sort of said in one of his press conferences, they weren't so good to go on as to go on 19 games unbeaten, and they're not so bad to have gone 12 games without a win in all competitions. And it is all competitions. And actually, it may come back and bite me, but 2 years ago, I wrote a piece saying that Palace probably or almost certainly wouldn't be relegated, when actually I felt, I should have said they definitely won't get relegated. So here's me coming back and saying that they won't get relegated. But I do think if, and it is a very big if, Palace do start to slide down much closer towards relegation, and if things go very badly on Sunday, I can see Glasner departing sooner rather than later. But I think the fans have a lot to play in this. I think the fan reaction and the way that they are, and if Palace get absolutely battered on Sunday, then fine. I can see Glasner going. I'm not saying that'll definitely happen, of course, but it's possible. I think the most likely outcome is that Palace will pick up some wins, and he'll see it out to the end of the season, and they'll just trundle along till the end of the season. But at the same time, I think, given everything that's happened, he is under a lot more pressure and a lot more scrutiny. He hasn't helped himself. And again, as I say, he's kind of, to some extent, lost the fans a bit, not completely, but they booed him. Like, I couldn't believe, given where they were, given that a month ago they were singing his name to Last Christmas at Shelbourne away in the Conference League, and then a month later they're booing him after the Sunderland game, and they're booing Jean-Philippe Mateta, and you just wouldn't believe that how quickly things can change. So again, that's another reason why I wouldn't completely say 100% he'll see out the season, because things can really quickly change. And if Palace think that they're going to get relegated, or very good chance of getting relegated, they will act. And that's why they acted, partly why they acted the way they did in the winter window, is because they didn't want to risk getting relegated, because it would be catastrophic for the club. And that is always going to be their aim, is to avoid relegation. And I know Glasner gets frustrated with that, and I can understand why, but that does have to be the very first aim of Palace, is avoid relegation.
I mean, Dom, you almost got a bit tribal there. I'm loving this. Really enjoying that. I'll leave you with the last couple of questions on this one then, really. I mean, Brighton this weekend, an opportunity to galvanise this team for a derby, which I don't think many people understand much. So can I ask you to, one, explain why it is a rivalry and a derby, but secondly, a great opportunity for Palace to get back to winning ways as well?
Well, it's a rivalry really born of familiarity. The clubs came up from the third tier to the top division together alongside each other over a succession of years in the 70s. A lot of games against each other, a lot of fractious games against each other, including an FA Cup first round tie, I think, that went to 5 matches, 2 of which were postponed due to the weather, and one eventually played at Stamford Bridge on a neutral venue, which was a very, very controversial game, of which Palace emerged, fortunately, very fortunate to emerge victorious. And then Alan Mullery, the Brighton manager, had some coffee thrown at him as he was leaving the pitch, and threw a load of small change at the feet of the Palace fans and sort of said, "That's all you're worth, Palace." And it sort of escalated from there, really. But it's a good rivalry. I mean, it's every team needs one, obviously, and it does galvanise the fan base still in a positive way. In a positive way, he says. There have been some incidents over the years. Incidents over the years that haven't been particularly positive. But there you go. But that's just football for you, I suppose. And yeah, it is an opportunity. Definitely, it was an opportunity last season after a dreadful start, the worst start Palace had in the top division, and then they went to Brighton. I think it was in December, when they'd recovered a bit by then, but they still weren't playing to their full potential, and they were brilliant that day. They won 3-1 and were absolutely excellent. And from that moment on, their season kicked on all the way to Wembley. And yeah, so it is an opportunity. Palace have got to turn this around sooner rather than later. And if they did that at Brighton, then it would actually heal a lot of wounds. I mean, if Strand Larsen and Guesson and Brennan Johnson make an impact in that game, then they're already cult heroes at Crystal Palace. I mean, that's a real chance for them to hit the ground running and to make a mark and to win the fan base over. And suddenly, the size of the fees that have been paid go out the window. No one cares about that anymore. So they've got to look at it as a chance to show what they can do. Glasner, if he wins that match, will suddenly become a hero again. And you can look forward to the rest of the season with a bit more confidence. But there's always the flip side to that, isn't there? I guess that if things don't go well, then then the agony is prolonged a bit longer. So yeah, we'll see. It'll be a great occasion. It's always feisty. It's always good, and it'll probably end up 0-0. So, actually, not with Palace not being able to keep a clean sheet anymore. So it might be 1-1.
Yeah, of course, Palace do have Brighton away on Sunday, so make sure you keep an eye out for that match. Gents, appreciate your time as always. Matt, Dom, and also thank you guys for joining us as well. We'll catch you soon. For more from the Athletic FC podcast, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. We've got top journalists like David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anker, and plenty more through the entire season. Make sure you don't miss an episode of the Athletic FC. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts from.